Hi, my name's Dr. Ellen Storm from U-Turn Health. It's Sunday the 11th of February and I've just finished the second of 3 night shifts. And I wanted to pop on and talk to you guys a little bit today about a subject that I'm quite passionate about, I feel quite strongly about, and as a paediatrician, that is infant formula milk. And I've given this post the title, Cow's Milk is for Baby Cows. But I want to explain what my position is in relation to this, because I think sometimes I might be a little misunderstood. And so I'm going to start by talking a little bit about my own experience as a mother before I talk about my experience as a doctor. Because I have currently 13-year-old twin daughters, and they were born by emergency cesarean section at 10 o'clock at night when I was 39 plus 3 weeks gestation. And they weighed 8 pounds 3 and 7 pounds 2, so they were huge. I had over 15 pounds of baby delivered from me. And after that cesarean, I was very poorly and I was very bruised and I was in a lot of pain because they were quite hard to get out. They were quite comfortable. They didn't really want to be born, and one of them had sort of started to move downwards, so she was a little bit stuck. And I think I had a little tiny obstetrician. She was lovely. She was short and she had to stand on a stool and sort of try and haul my babies out of me. Anyway, the result of that was that I was on a cocktail of 3 painkillers for about the first 8 weeks of their life. I went home from the hospital when they were 3 days old, still unable to stand upright, like literally bent double like that. And we were so desperate to go home. I remember my partner wheeling me out in a wheelchair, literally unable to stand. And then I was on these painkillers, like taking them like this. I was in a lot of pain. So I took something called diclofenac, and then I took paracetamol and ibuprofen. And what happened was I didn't produce any breast milk. And I was desperate to breastfeed. I really, really wanted to breastfeed, and I just didn't produce anything. I was expressing, I was doing all the right things. You know, I'd read every book, watched every video, everything, and nothing happened. It just didn't happen. So I ended up very reluctantly giving my daughters formula. I didn't want to give them formula, but they did eventually. I had to concede that they had to be fed, and so we did that, and we went through a very long process of doing expressing and topping up and all the things that we still do, and I talk to mums about in a lot of detail all the time. It's part of my job. And I still didn't produce any milk for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then I stopped the painkillers. That was I think they were about 7 weeks old at that point in time. And when I stopped the painkillers, suddenly I had milk. It was very noticeable to me, although nobody else ever particularly acknowledged that the fact was that my milk supply was being suppressed by one or all of the painkillers that I was taking. Maybe the particular cocktail, maybe it was an interaction between them, maybe it was the diclofenac. I don't know which one it was. I just know that at the point at which I was finally able to wean myself off them completely, and I was trying to wean myself off them, but I was still in a lot of pain, was when my milk came in. And then suddenly it came in, so you have this kind of like, oh, hey, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Give me some babies. And because I'd been kind of still putting them to the breast, they knew what they were doing, and we were able to kind of wean the formula down quite quickly at that point, and then they were exclusively breastfed from there on until they were about 13 months. Not exclusively breastfed until 13 months, obviously they had solids. But what I mean is they didn't have any formula milk or anything, any other kind of milk. They just had breast milk from then until 13 months. And then they had a little bit of the powdered soya formula, a bit sort of in some cereal type things and stuff like that. When I first weaned them, I gave them that for a little while. And then they went on to the Alpro giraffe. We call it giraffe milk in our house. That's the Alpro 1 to 3 year old soya milk. So then they sort of had that when they were like 1 to 3, and probably a bit longer than that as well. So that's what happened for me. And I didn't know for all of that 8 weeks at the beginning that was what was going on. But it only kind of was very clear to me at the point at which, I weaned the drugs and then the milk came in kind of almost immediately. So that was very clear to me. But nobody ever suggested that it could be the medication, and it didn't occur to me either in that 8 weeks. Not that I could have stopped them anyway, I don't think, even if I had wanted to. I did need to take them. So in that situation, I didn't really have a choice. And the formula milk I gave to my babies, you could argue, saved their life. But in the old days, or in places in the world where there isn't formula milk and things happen, a whole range of different things happen that mean that women, for some reason or other, can't breastfeed. You can only do one of two things. You can either give another human being's milk, so you can wet nurse, if you can find a wet nurse, or donor breast milk, which we do give to our premature babies on the special care baby unit, on the neonatal unit. Or you give them the milk from another animal, or you give them some kind of soya formula, but you give them an artificial formula of some description. And I'm not going to go into all of the different situations in which that can happen for women, but it does happen. And there are situations when formula milk is absolutely life-saving for the baby. Or at least, we don't really have a culture of wet nursing anymore, but that's what used to happen in the olden days, those olden days. So I have really mixed feelings about it, because I'm very grateful that it was there, but I had a very high-tech birth as well. I didn't have a natural birth, which I wish I could have done, but I couldn't, that was how it was. So I try to practice gratitude in relation to the fact that I have two beautiful daughters who are well and healthy, and, the cesarean section and the formula milk and all of the interventions, the medical interventions, meant that I can have them and in my life, and I'm incredibly grateful. And they were a bit rashy when they were on the formula milk. That cleared up after that stopped. I don't remember any other major issues from my point of view, but definitely the skin. I think I noticed that changed. So as a doctor, I am very passionate about breastfeeding. I'm very pro-breastfeeding. I spend a lot of time talking to women about breastfeeding and trying to help them. And having had my own experience, I have some personal experience to talk from, as well as some professional understanding of how we can support breastfeeding. And there are still situations in which that's not possible. But actually, with good support and correct information, those situations are not as common as perhaps some people think. So it's pretty rare to find women who can't breastfeed unless they have some other medical condition going on, or maybe they're on medications. Sometimes there are medications that women are on that are breastfeeding is contraindicated, as in the medication itself might be passed on to the baby and cause harm to the baby. So that's one situation in which formula feeding would be indicated. I don't think we have a recognition that there are medications that actually suppress breast milk production very much. That's my personal opinion that happens based on my experience. But and I do always ask women when they're struggling with what they're taking. But if you look the medications up They tell you about whether they're contraindicated for breastfeeding, as in whether it's safe to breastfeed with that medication. They don't. I've never seen anything about supply and the effect of the medication on supply when I've looked up medications that mums might be on. So, having said all of that, there are situations when formula feeding is not only indicated but actually genuinely life-saving, and it can be, and we should be grateful for that option that we have. It also causes problems because cow's milk is for baby cows, not for human babies. So if we give human babies cow's milk, they don't do as well as if we give them human milk. And generally speaking, that not doing as well falls into two sort of brackets. One is the skin, which I mentioned, which I noticed with my girls. And the other thing is gastrointestinal discomfort of some form or other. So babies are uncomfortable and they seem to be in pain, they cry, they draw their legs up, they get constipated. And we have a number of different sort of categories for how we can think about what might be going on. Sometimes we call it colic. People think maybe it's lactose intolerance, maybe it's cow's milk protein intolerance, maybe it's cow's milk allergy. And we have these sort of range of terms. And certainly initially when we see a baby who's got these kind of problems, we're not going in doing invasive tests or anything. We're just testing out different milk types and trying to see what might work for that baby and what might improve their symptoms. And sometimes it works, and sometimes we never find a solution, because as long as that baby is being fed some form of cow's milk, they're just not going to be perfect. And, you know, lots of adults also suffer with problems related to cow's milk, which they don't always recognise are related to cow's milk. And we have this lovely kind of diagnostic category known as IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which is, you know, describes, again, a general state of gastrointestinal discomfort that is a little bit kind of non-specific, and a lot of people end up with that kind of label to describe their issues. And I certainly have heard lots of people say that their IBS got better when they gave up cow's milk. So I think what I'm trying to say, so the next thing, I suppose, is because my experience of my milk coming in at 8 weeks and then being able to start breastfeeding fully at that point in time, I became aware of something called relactation. And what I did wasn't exactly relactation, it was more spontaneous when I stopped the medication, but it is possible for women to do something called relactation, which means that if you've formula fed for a period of time, you can still switch back to breastfeeding, because your breast milk production doesn't actually just switch off. The hormones that are producing breast milk, they're around for a long time, and the breast milk supply will vary depending on the level of demand. So it's a supply and demand situation, and the more the baby suckles and feeds and there's a stimulus to produce milk, the more milk there's going to be. So even if a baby's had a difficult time at the beginning, they can still go on to breastfeed later. But to do it's quite difficult. It requires a bit of support and knowledge and perseverance, particularly when babies have got more used to bottle feeding. But it is possible, and people have done it. And I think it's an option that mums do need to know about if they are facing a situation where their baby's really not coping very well with the formula, whichever version of the formula they might be on. So the lactose-free or the hydrolyzed formula, you know, if they're still having problems after that, then that's definitely an option, and it's a thing that I'm always willing to talk to mums about. But I think it's not particularly a lot. What I see is a lot of women giving up very early in the first day or two. And what I remember is that I still had a breast milk supply for ages, like maybe a year after I actually stopped breastfeeding completely. So, you know, it would have come back again. So it really, you know, that is there. Okay, so I've now talked for 15 minutes instead of my allotted daily 5. If you've seen my last couple of videos, I'm trying to do 5 minutes a day, and get me on my soapbox about something like this, and I'll go on and on. So I'm going to stop there. There's lots and lots more that one can talk about in relation to breastfeeding. If you're interested in the subject, then the UNICEF Baby Friendly website's got loads and loads and loads of interesting resources, links to research. So just Google that and it'll come up really easily. And yeah, have a look. And I'm going to stop talking now. Good to see you again. Take care. Have a lovely day. Maybe see you tomorrow.